Wow. Okay. So this is going to be a pretty big webinar today. We have a ton of people hosting. We've run this webinar in the past with a few different PMSs and things. So mostly catered towards, holistic strategies, general strategies, even if you aren't using PriceLabs. This time, since it's a lot of PriceLabs users on the calls, it's going to be a lot more catered towards, hey, how do we actually implement these things in PriceLabs? So let's go ahead and get started. And thank you for everyone who can hear me loud and clear. Lots of responses. So as we go through the webinar today, keep that energy up, keep submitting questions as we go through everything. Love hearing from you guys. The only thing is my co-host Richie will be joining in about 30 minutes. So I'll be a little slower to answer questions as we go here. But 30 minutes from now, there'll be another person in the chat to handle all of those. So without further ado, welcome to 10 pricing tactics to apply in 2021. So we've been doing a ton of customer calls recently, checking in on some portfolios and things. And we kind of compiled a list of the most common things that people are missing, 10 tactics that will be extremely helpful if you apply them, and then we'll go over how to actually execute them in PriceLabs here. So some housekeeping. If you can't hear us, be sure to connect to audio. Hopefully you can hear. Lots of people confirming that mics are working, so that is great. Secondly, we do encourage you to submit questions as we go using that Q&A box below. So if you could use the Q&A instead of the chat functionality, that would be super helpful. That just lets us kind of keep everything all in one place, makes it a little easier to go through all of your questions as they do come in, but do ask questions. And then if you do have any questions that are either specific to your location or specific to your account where something isn't working or you want a second opinion, definitely send those over to support@pricelabs.co. So we won't be able to take care of those now, but someone from our team would love to get back to you. So support@pricelabs.co. I'll mention our support team a few more times as we go through everything, but they are truly a fantastic resource. And then last but not least, we get this question all the time. So we will be recording this webinar for future access, and then I will be sending it out probably 2 hours or so after we're done here. So once that processes, I will send that out. So if you do have to leave early for any reason, no worries. Take care of whatever you have to take care of, and I will send that recording out. So let's dive right into it. So a quick agenda. We'll talk a tiny bit about PriceLabs just for anyone who isn't familiar with us yet, although you are on this webinar, so hopefully you do know something about us. Then we'll dive into our 10 pricing strategies. That'll be a long haul, so make sure we ask questions as we go, and then we'll finally leave our remaining time for a Q&A where anything that we don't get to during the presentation, we will save some time to answer those afterwards here. So first thing, a tiny bit about PriceLabs on the most basic level. So we are a revenue management platform, and we take care of 3 things. So we work on dynamic pricing, so automatically adjusting your rates based off of what is currently happening in the market. We work on market dashboards, so giving you access to data for your specific market so that you have a great pulse on what is going on. So a lot of today's presentation will be focused around our market dashboards and how you can use the data from the dashboards to kind of set smarter strategies within your dynamic pricing here. And then finally, we also work on portfolio analytics most recently. So that is a brand new product we released. You'll probably see it at the top of your screen here in PriceLabs, says portfolio analytics. That basically gives you more insights on the actual bookings that are coming in. So trying to make it as easy as possible to track your current trends in bookings, compare those to the trends that are going on in the market, and then see if you can further optimize your dynamic pricing to really take care of your rates and optimize for those current booking patterns here. Then a little bit about PriceLabs. So some of you who are customers might not know too much about us. We were started back in 2014, so right at the cutting edge of that vacation rental tech boom here that we were seeing there. So it's been almost 7 years at this point. Our team has grown really quickly recently. So now we have members in US, Brazil, Portugal, France, and India. So a pretty diverse spread out team. That helps us give you 24-hour support 5 days a week here. So someone is always online to handle your questions here. We've priced over 100,000 properties at this point, and then we are being used in over 100 countries, which is always crazy to me. So if you have listings in any crazy place where you're like, hey, no one supports, our properties here, we work anywhere in the world where there are other vacation rentals for us to take data from. So if there's at least, let's say, 50 or so Airbnb listings in your area, PriceLabs will work there. Definitely shoot us a message if you have questions, but we work pretty much everywhere. So diving right into it, I guess let's get started here with our 10 pricing strategies. So first and foremost, this one is super simple, but one that I see a ton of people missing out on. First one, open your calendar for future dates. This is something that seems very straightforward, but a lot of people miss it. So if you are a person who only, let's say, opens their calendar for the next 3 months, I guess I want to ask you, what are you afraid of? Why aren't you opening your calendar further out? So travel trends are constantly changing. For the most part, in most markets, we haven't started seeing the uptick in summer bookings quite yet. Some of the more traditional vacation markets, we're definitely getting to that season where more and more people are booking. So our recommendation is to definitely not miss out on that first wave of summer bookings or any of those event bookings by having your calendar closed for future dates. So a few things you can do in PriceLabs to protect yourself. You could set higher minimum stays for far out dates to make sure that, hey, even if your calendar is open, past 3 months or past 6 months or past 9 months, you're making sure that you aren't taking any of those shorter stays that would block you from taking longer bookings in the future. So if we hop into PriceLabs really quick, just showing you quickly what that looks like, and let me open a new tab here. With our minimum stay policies, a few things you can do. So you can have your traditional minimum night stay. So let's say you have a 2-night minimum for weekdays, 3-night minimum on weekends. What you can do if you're worried about opening your calendar for those future dates to make sure no kind of bad bookings come in, you can say, hey, if anyone is booking more than 90 days in advance, make sure they book at least a 5-night stay. So this way you're protecting yourself from someone taking a short booking during your high season further out by having that minimum stay in place, so that even though your calendar is open, you're only taking longer reservations there. Additionally, down below here in our customizations, we do have the minimum far out pricing. So something else I definitely recommend, if you are hesitant about opening your calendar far out, what you can do is say, hey, outside of, let's say, 90 days, for example, set a higher minimum price. So take my standard minimum price for weekdays and let's say increase that by 50%. And then take my minimum price for weekends and maybe double that. So this way, worst case, you're taking a much higher minimum rate. So there really is no reason to leave that calendar blocked off. If someone does want to book your dates at that higher minimum stay and the minimum price, they are definitely free to do so. Definitely recommend that here. Next one, quick one, using niche OTAs to target longer term travelers. So this is something I've heard from a lot of property managers having a lot of success with this. So basically trying to fill your calendar, especially in the slow season that we're currently in for a lot of markets, with those longer term travelers who might be looking for some accommodation here. So furnished accommodation is definitely getting a lot bigger here. So here we're talking typically about traveling nurses. So I would definitely recommend checking what channels your channel manager integrates with, seeing if there's any other channels that you're not currently listed out on, and potentially sending your rates to those OTAs just so that more people are exposed to your properties and maybe more people in that longer term travel sector are exposed to your properties. So I've heard things about Furnished Finder. I'm not sure which PMSs connect to them, but that's definitely a name that has come up from some PMs. So just things to look into here. If you're curious about what OTAs your channel manager integrates with, definitely ask them. I'm sure they have some recommendations there. Alrighty, next one, optimizing rates for last minute bookings. So last minute bookings this year are definitely a little different than they have been in previous years here. So with the pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainty that's keeping travelers from booking dates further in advance. So more and more bookings are coming up last minute. So especially for this summer, there might be a lot of pent up demand for travel. But my guess is that a lot of that demand will be super last minute demand with people planning weekend trips, weekday trips, just short getaways last minute, especially since the situation is still pretty uncertain with coronavirus, with lockdowns. I am really guessing that that demand will be there. It will just be more pent up than ever. So instead of decreasing your prices last minute to try to drive demand, if you're in a very hot market where things are filling to, let's say, 80 or 90 or 95% occupancy in your area, and there is a very high likelihood of getting booked here, I would definitely recommend not just using your same blanket last minute discounts, if anything, decreasing those last minute discounts in your high season, but potentially even thinking about setting last minute premiums. So one case that we come up with travel plans being uncertain, we get a lot of cancellations last minute where people thought they were going to travel in your high season, but maybe last minute they cancel their booking because of some sort of COVID restriction that came up in your area. If demand is still high, take those dates and see if you can charge a little more for them with a last minute premium if your market is expected to fill up all the way. So I do believe there might be kind of supply shortages like we saw last year with rates going extremely high. So make sure you're revisiting your last minute pricing and not just offering blanket discounts across the board here. So how that can be done in PriceLabs, if you go into your customizations and go up to last minute prices, instead of leaving this to our default, which happens when this is turned off, you can turn on this customization and say, hey, last minute, maybe within the last 5 days, instead of typically discounting my properties, let's actually put a 15% premium on those dates, see if we can fill them with any of those last minute travelers. Or, I mean, you can still offer those discounts, but instead of going as aggressive as 30%, maybe choose a more mellow discount just to, not discount as much when demand is super high here. Alrighty, next one, another super simple one that is basically free money here is filling.
This is
Hey,
Richie. Can I block you for a question that's come up? Does it make sense to block high premium weeks and release them close to the date?
So that is a strategy I've definitely seen in the past. So you can, instead of blocking those high premium weeks, what I've seen work more effectively is simply to set high minimum prices for those weeks and then gradually kind of getting less and less aggressive on those minimums as you get closer to that booking date. So what you can do, if you're setting rates in PriceLabs, if you're setting rates in groups, you can use our group overrides here under update overrides, or you can use listing level overrides to do the exact same thing. But let's say we're going into the high season here and we select the 4th of July weekend. So that's a big one in a lot of vacation rental markets in the States here. So let's say we select Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday here, since we expect it to be a super hot weekend in your area. What you can do, instead of blocking it off, you could say, hey, I want to set a minimum price that is, let's say, a, I don't know, 300% increase on my standard minimum price. So you can basically set a very high price for those high demand weekends. And then there is a chance that someone will book it. But if no one books it, you can, of course, relax that minimum as you get closer to that booking date when there's less supply in that market, but demand might still be high. So instead of blocking it, I typically just recommend setting a high minimum. That way it's still bookable, but for that higher rate here. Awesome. No, and Richie, thank you. And keep interrupting with questions as they come in. You can definitely track them a lot better than I can here. And everyone, do ask questions as you come up with them as we go through all these steps, since there are a lot of them here.
Yeah, and cool. There's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Use that it's easier to keep track of questions. Chat icon is not very wieldy. So use the Q&A icon.
Awesome. Thank you, Richie. Perfect. Next one on the list, filling your orphan gaps. So when we talk about orphan gaps, these are gaps that appear in between your bookings that are shorter than your minimum stay. So let's say we have a situation going on where you typically have a 3-night minimum for weekdays, and then let's say a 4-night minimum for weekends. So one thing that can happen in this case would be a 2-night gap in between bookings that essentially wouldn't be bookable because you have that 3-night minimum stay in place. So our recommendation here is to use our minimum stay for orphan booking setting here, and that will basically identify any gaps in your calendar and automatically make them bookable. So how it works on the right-hand side here, you can let us know what lengths of gaps you want to target. And then on the left-hand side, you can let us know what minimum stay to assign to those gaps. So for example, if you never want to take any 1-night bookings, you could say, hey, only target gaps that are between 2 and 3 nights here. And what this will do, any gaps that appear between reservations that are 2 nights or 3 nights, which are shorter than the minimum stay that would typically be assigned to that date, PriceLabs will automatically assign a minimum stay that is the length of the gap here. So any 2-night gaps will get a 2-night minimum, any 3-night gaps will get a 3-night minimum, and then you will basically be ready to go. Those dates will be bookable in your calendar, and those won't just slip by as vacancies since no one was able to book them. So PriceLabs will do that automatically. I know you can typically set that in your PMS, but this automation will just save you time and make sure that nothing kind of falls in between the gaps. What you can do additionally is under orphan day prices here, you can use this setting to either discount those gaps or set a premium on those gaps. So you can say, hey, any gaps in between bookings that are 3 days or less, let's set a 20% discount on those gaps. So that will basically make it more likely for you to get a booking on those dates since you're priced a little bit cheaper than the competition. Of course, tougher to find people to fill gaps since they do need to be looking for those specific dates. So this provides just a small incentive there to get another booking. Alternatively, if you are in a very high demand market, so just like we were saying for the summer season here, you can use this to set premiums on any gaps in your calendar. So you could say, hey, if I do get any short cancellations last minute, make sure I'm charging more for these gaps that pop up in my calendar since now the dates are available last minute when there might not be much availability, especially for those shorter stays, and everything might already be booked up here. Awesome. So that is setting gaps here. And I see a question coming in. Will this be recorded? Yes, this is getting recorded. So we will send that recording out right afterwards here.
Cool. Oliver, there are 2 more questions. One kind of unrelated, but relevant because you did some of this. Is there a reason why you typically adjust prices of your minimum price instead of base?
Yes. So when we're looking at adjusting prices, this comes up in a few places. So this came up in our minimum far out pricing here, where I did a % change on min price instead of % change on base. So whenever I'm setting minimums, I typically do it as a % change on min. That just keeps everything consistent, and I always have a good idea of what's being adjusted. The difference between the two here, so each listing in PriceLabs, of course, has a minimum price, a base price, and a maximum. If you do the % change on min, we're essentially taking your minimum price, increasing that by a percentage, and that becomes your new minimum price. However, if you do a % change on base, that would just take this base price, adjust the base by a percentage, and that would become your new base here. So you can really go either way. Doesn't really make a difference within the system here. That's just how I do it to keep it consistent. If it makes more sense in your case to say, hey, I want to take 145, increase 145 by 50%, and that's my new minimum outside of 30 days, that definitely works. Just depends how you want to think about it. Either of the two are definitely an option here. Okay, and then Taylor asking, why not have orphan day discounts under orphan day prices? Orphan day book minimum stays for orphan bookings under orphan prices. So by default, minimum stays for orphan bookings live within the minimum stay update section. So this is super important. Minimum stay updates, if you are turning this on in PriceLabs, we definitely recommend setting your standard minimum stays right here as well, and not just using our minimum stays for your orphan booking. So that definitely makes things more confusing, since then we're pulling minimum stays potentially from your PMS and from PriceLabs. So I definitely recommend using all of our minimum stay functionality. At least you're filling in your standard minimum for weekdays and weekends if you are using this minimum stay for orphan booking setting here. Awesome, definitely great questions for everyone. So keep those coming in. Okie dokie, next one. This one's super basic, so it'll be quick. Increasing prices for weekends, high season events, and holidays in 2021. So this is something that PriceLabs is, of course, already doing for you. So we're already looking into Airbnb every day, taking that data, seeing what the demand is for, the different seasons, for the different days of the week, for different dates that might have events, for different holidays. So PriceLabs is already doing this for you and optimizing your rates based off of what's going on. If you aren't currently using PriceLabs, that's definitely something that you'll want to look into, where this is one of the most simple things you can do just to get higher revenue, is changing your rates between weekdays and weekends, since there's typically more of that weekend demand that you can get a little bit more for. Changing rates for those high seasons and for any events that get called out in the future. Now, if you aren't using our dynamic pricing but simply want more data for what's happening in your market, here, let's look at this Nashville dashboard here. Our market dashboards can be super helpful just in tracking some of these trends in demand so that you know when to apply these changes. So these dashboards basically let you select an address that you want to analyze and a radius around that address, and then we will show you pricing and occupancy and booking trend information for all of those listings that we find within that radius. So this can be a super helpful tool for looking at any future occupancies. If you go down to prices and occupancy trends here, you can look at any future dates, see what occupancies are for any future dates to identify, hey, are there any jumps in demand where certain days are getting booked more than other dates? Might be worth it to increase rates on those dates if they're getting booked more and you aren't using PriceLabs to automate that process. So for example, here in Nashville, June 6th, 7th, and 8th, definitely higher demand than the other dates around it. So that's a situation where I would go in, see what's going on there, set higher rates just to capitalize off of that higher demand here. Same thing, you can see different trends for, hey, what does occupancy look like between weekdays and weekends? What does price look like between weekdays and weekends? You can look at our historic rates here to see, hey, how does pricing change by season here? So lots of good data. If you aren't using PriceLabs to already automate your prices, you could at least use our market dashboards to get data on that pricing and apply that data to your rates manually here. So definitely an option if you aren't automating your rates already. And then question coming in about the data that we're showing in our market dashboards. Market dashboards are still constantly being enhanced. So we're pushing updates, I would say, on an almost monthly basis or so. So if you do have any feedback for other trends that would be helpful to see, definitely shoot us an email at support@pricelabs.co. Always curious, what would be most helpful. We definitely have some ideas that we're implementing, but we always want to hear from you on that regard here. Alrighty, and then next question about market dashboards. So this is definitely good to iterate here. We have this bedroom filter in the top left corner. So when you are reviewing data for your area, I definitely recommend making it specific to the bedroom type that you're looking for. So either 2 and 3 bedrooms or just 2 bedrooms, for example, so that when you are comparing your rates to the market, you are looking, at apples to apples here. And then with that, the question was, hey, are there any filters to exclude beachfront properties on coastal locations, since those typically skew the data? Currently, there's no option to filter by, amenities or beachfront or luxury or professionally managed or any of those things. However, those are enhancements that we're hoping to add in the future. We're hoping to add the ability to select your own comp sets here. So there will be improvements just to let you get more and more granular in what listings you are looking to kind of benchmark yourself against in these market dashboards here. Awesome. Next thing to mention here, revisiting competitor pricing monthly to make sure you're priced relatively well. So PriceLabs, we're of course optimizing your rates. We're of course taking the most up-to-date rates and updating our algorithm as time passes to make sure that you're using the most recent trends here. If you aren't using PriceLabs, if you're purely, setting your prices based off of that neighborhood data, definitely something to refer back to, since 2020 was so volatile. So trends in how far out people were booking, what dates are getting booked, how much are people charging, those were changing on an almost weekly basis, I would say. So definitely refer back to the data pretty frequently to make sure that the rates you're setting are definitely in line with where the market's rates are. If you are using PriceLabs, this is definitely still a helpful recommendation for revisiting the base price that you have set for your properties. So first and foremost, I always recommend kind of keeping an eye on the 7, 15, and 30-day vacancy calendar that we have here. So this tool here is basically tracking what percentage of these dates in the top column heading are currently empty. So if you are seeing a lot of red here, if you're seeing a ton of vacancy where most of your dates are empty, I would definitely recommend hopping into review prices, then hopping into this neighborhood data tab here in the top right corner. So this tab right here takes your listing, which will be this black kind of rectangle right here, and shows you data on all of the listings in the area that we're using to excuse me. It'll show you data on all of the listings in your area, which we're using as your neighborhood, as kind of your comp set here. So if you scroll up to the top, again, definitely make sure you filter so that you're only looking at the bedroom type that's applicable to you. In this case, I'm looking at a very large 2-bedroom, so I typically compare it to a 2 and 3 bedroom. And then here in the top graph, you can compare your recommended price, which is the same price that you'll see in the PriceLabs calendar. So that's just your nightly rate that's already being sent out to Airbnb or your PMS, and compare that against the market's rates. So the market's rates are shown in this tan and blue color. So where the tan meets the blue, that's your median price. The bottom of the tan is the 25th percentile. Top of the blue is the 75th percentile. So I would recommend looking at how this black line compares to the market's rates and kind of adjusting as necessary. So if you typically price towards the lower end of the market, and all of a sudden you see, hey, maybe you have small listings, they're not very luxury, maybe they don't have great reviews, and maybe being priced close to the bottom of the market makes sense for you. If you typically see, hey, I'm all of a sudden not getting any bookings for my property, we're seeing a lot of red in these charts up here, I would take a look at here and see, hey, how do my prices compare to the market? Maybe the entire market has shifted its rates down to account for, lower demand in the low season, and now your rates are on the higher end of the market. So that would be a good situation to come in here, decrease your base price, click save and refresh will regenerate that line at the new base price. And it'll show up lower compared to the competition here. So if you ever say, hey, I stopped getting bookings, or hey, all of a sudden I'm getting way more bookings than I used to get, revisit neighborhood data, see how your rates compare to the market, and kind of make any adjustments as necessary here. So highly recommend this. This is of course included, and this data will be, super specific to each of your listings, all very local here. And Richie, I see a few questions came in. Anything applicable to talk about right now? Okie dokie. Sounds good. Good. Next tactic here, pricing tactics when approaching your high season. So this is something that comes up a lot here. I know last high season that we had, demand was through the roof in a lot of locations. I know a lot of you had your best summers you've ever had. So once all of that pent up coronavirus demand got released on the market, people were booking extremely quickly. And if you didn't have your rates high enough, we definitely had a few property managers undersell their listings since they were discounting heavily due to COVID. And then, of course, when demand picked up, those discounts were still in place and they sold out a little, too inexpensively, leaving a little bit of money on the table. So our recommendations here, set higher rates early on. So if you look at your market comparison of rates and you see, hey, I'm typically pacing with right around the median price. Maybe I'm spiking towards the high end of the market on my weekends and on my high demand dates, but my summer is a lot higher priced than the rest of the market here. Typically, I would say this far out, that is okay. So what we'll see in a lot of markets is that as we get closer to those summer high season dates, the market's price will actually start increasing. So I would recommend not necessarily pacing your high season with the summer just yet. I would recommend maybe setting higher rates for that summer right now so that you don't undersell your properties. As we get closer, we'll see, are people booking the summer strongly? Is that demand coming in? And then, of course, if if your rates are a little too high and no one's booking, you can start gradually dropping those rates here. Now, if you look at future occupancy right here, you'll be able to see what percentage of your market is already booked out for those future dates. So here in this market that I'm managing, you can see that July through kind of September is already starting to see a small uptick in booking. So typically, 13% of all listings have already been booked for July at this point. At this point, I'm priced a little higher than the rest of those listings that are already getting bookings. I'm definitely on the very high end of the market, but I'm okay with that. So I don't want to be one of the first properties that gets booked, since that's typically an indicator that I could have charged a little more. So I'll keep my rates a little higher for now. Then as we get closer, I'll of course release those relax my minimums that I might have in place there. So a few things you can do. You can set a minimum price for that high season here. So you could say, hey, add a date specific override, and then let's go maybe from mid-June all the way through the end of September, since that's my high season. And we can say, hey, set a minimum price that is a 100% increase on my minimum. So I'm taking 115, doubling it, and that's my minimum price for the summer. So I would be happy at that minimum, add that in. That way my rates are guaranteed to be a little higher, and we can relax that as we get closer and we really see how strong the demand is for the summer, since most people haven't started booking yet. All right, next idea is setting higher minimum stays further out and gradually decreasing those as you get closer. So there is honestly nothing worse than, let's say, having a 1-night minimum for weekdays and a 2-night minimum for weekends. And all of a sudden someone books 2 nights for your 4th of July weekend, or someone books, 1 night on a Thursday or a Friday that someone else might have booked for a week here. So what you can do, you could say, hey, for any of my further out dates, so let's say anyone booking outside of 30 days, let's at least have a 3-night minimum. Then you could say, hey, anyone who's booking outside of 90 days, let's have at least a 7-night minimum. So this way, if anyone is currently booking for those summer nights, they would have to put in a week-long reservation. So if your rates are very competitive for the market, here you're saying, hey, if you're booking right now, you can book at those rates. Let's just make sure you book a longer stay so you don't block us from taking any, so you don't book any shorter stays that block us from taking someone who might have booked an entire week, leaving fewer gaps in our calendar. So by setting those longer minimum stays further out, having our system automatically decreases these as we get closer. Very, very, very effective strategy. Also, people typically book longer stays further out. You can see that in our market dashboards. So if we go to length of stay versus booking window, this is where in our charts you can see how far in advance most bookings are coming in here. So this will let you know, hey, are people even booking a month to 2 months in advance, 4 months in advance, 6 months in advance? Are those bookings coming in? Then what you can do, you can stack length of stay and booking window. So if you click on this drop down and you go to occupied nights by LOS and booking window here, we'll let you know, hey, based off of how far out people are booking, how long are they staying for? So for example, you could see, hey, 2 to 4 months in advance when people are making reservations, most of their bookings are for 3 to 4 nights. So that's that orange section in the chart here. You can see that makes up the majority of the bookings. And then underneath here, we have all of those longer bookings as well. So you could say, hey, there's a good chunk of bookings that are 5 nights or more. This whole bottom chunk, that's about, I don't know, a third of all bookings that are coming in for those dates. So let's set a minimum stay of 5 nights outside of 2 months, and then you can gradually reduce that as you get closer to that booking date here. Awesome. And then alternatively, when you are setting those minimum stays in your customizations, you can of course either set those using our kind of decreasing minimum stay rules, or you can set those through overrides. So you could go into update overrides here and say, hey, for let's say July through the end of September, let's set a 5-night minimum stay, add that in. And then all you need to do is remember, hey, I have that 5-night minimum for my summer dates. As we approach summer, you'll probably want to relax that minimum as we get closer and more of those shorter stays are starting to get booked here. So then you would want to relax it. But for now, since we're still pretty far out, maybe put in that longer minimum stay for your summer dates here. All righty. Okay, and then last thing here to mention for the summer dates, look at demand for specific dates and increase rates for spikes. So this is especially true if you aren't using our dynamic pricing. I see a lot of people say, hey, for my summer, I have my summer rate, which is a very high rate because it's the high season. That's great. However, there are typically additional dates in the summer where demand is going to be higher. People are going to be charging higher rates. So you can charge, additional premiums on top of that summer rate. So definitely looking at all of your long weekends, 4th of July, any festivals, any holidays, any marathons that might be happening in your area, setting special event pricing for those. Of course, if you are using PriceLabs, PriceLabs is doing that for you. Maybe looking at those rates, setting premiums if necessary, but definitely not operating off of the assumption that, hey, my high season, I have one high season rate, since things are still dynamic during the summer. And yeah, certain parts of your high season can get rented for more than other parts of your high season here. Awesome. Last bit of implementation to talk about. Occupancy-based adjustments to react to higher demand. So in PriceLabs, we have occupancy-based adjustments, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. So in our customizations, you can set up occupancy profiles that automatically adjust your rates based off of the demand for your listings. So how these work is depending on your occupancy for individual listings in these day ranges that you see at the top, we will either apply a discount when your occupancy is low or a premium when your occupancy starts to get higher here. So as you approach the high season, this can really help with your pacing. And if you think you're getting booked out too quickly, so let's say 61 to 90 days in advance, you're starting to receive bookings for the summer here. And let's say all of a sudden 61 to 90 days in advance, 50% of these dates are already full. That might be an indicator to say, hey, you're booking out a little too quickly. So let's start increasing rates to make sure you're not leaving money on the table. So you can definitely customize these charts to kind of scale up your premiums as your occupancy increases. So this would basically say, hey, if the dates between 60 days from today and 90 days from today, so that is looking at February, March, April, so that's looking at mid-April through mid-May. if I'm already getting booked where 50% of those dates are booked today, let's start increasing my prices since that seems like I'm pacing too quickly. So you can definitely adjust these charts to start having these premiums kick in for when your demand increases far out. So that's something I would recommend. At a minimum, of course, you do have just our default profile always kicking in, which kind of guides you in the right direction. So if, let's say, 30 to 60 days out, you start filling up, we'll automatically start increasing your rate slightly for those dates here. Perfect. And then
Hey,
as I
Oliver,
was saying,
can
oh
you
yeah,
talk a little bit about the occupancy-based discounts and how do we calculate occupancy? And maybe talk a little bit about listing occupancy versus portfolio occupancy discounts?
totally. Yep. So how we're calculating occupancy here, we're looking at what percentage of nights in this range is currently booked here. So let's say from today to 15 days in the future, we're saying, hey, of those 15 days, what percentage of those is currently booked? So if 0 to 10% of those days were booked, so either 0 bookings or 1 night is booked in the next 15 days, we would say, hey, that's extremely low occupancy. Let's discount all of the next 15 days by 15% here. Whereas if, let's say, 16 to 30 days out, 13 of those 15 days were booked, we would say, hey, your occupancy is extremely high. Let's put a premium on any of those dates. That are still available to hopefully charge slightly more for them. So when you are approaching that summer, potentially adding in another column here to look a little bit further out and just get more aggressive about increasing your rates so that if that demand shoots up and everyone starts booking all of a sudden, your rates are automatically reacting to that increase in bookings here. So this setting that you see here, occupancy-based adjustments, this looks at each individual listing's occupancies for those dates and adjust based off of that listing occupancy. So alternatively, if you go on the group settings, we have a setting that isn't turned on by default. So if this sounds helpful to you, it's called portfolio occupancy-based adjustments. We can definitely activate that for your account. Just shoot us a message in the Q&A with whatever email you use for logging into PriceLabs, and we can get this turned on for you. So what portfolio occupancy-based adjustments does, it looks identical to listing level occupancy-based adjustments. However, here we're looking at the average occupancy of your group for any future date. So let's say we look at a date that's 15 days from today, it would fall in this 11 to 20 day column here. So if you had 10 listings in this group, and let's say 8 of those 10 listings were booked 15 days from today, we would say, hey, for those 2 days that are remaining, we have 80% occupancy. Let's put a 15% premium 15 days from today on those 2 days that are remaining. So here we're looking at that group's occupancy for each date individually and adjusting rates based off of that. So this can be super effective when you have, let's say, multiple listings within a building that have very similar booking trends, and you're trying to optimize the occupancy of that building and not necessarily the occupancy of individual listings. This can also be helpful if you have, let's say, pretty similar 1-bedroom homes all in the same city, and you say, hey, if all of my 1-bedroom homes start getting booked, 200 days in advance because there's an event and all of a sudden I'm 40% booked 200 days in advance, we definitely want to start increasing our rates. So this can be good for event detection since we're looking at individual dates here instead of looking at, the average occupancy between these day ranges. So if this sounds helpful to have at your disposal here, definitely shoot us a message through that Q&A with the email you use to log into PriceLabs, and we can hop in and turn that off for your account here. Richie, before we move on, any other questions that would be good to address here? I know I haven't been monitoring the chat very much here.
No, there are certain questions that I think we can take at the end.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Sounds good. Perfect. And then these last two I already mentioned. So increasing your rates with those last minute premiums if demand is extremely high, and then also using those orphan date premiums for filling cancellations if you see that supply is low and people are still booking. So if we're tracking that supply, again, looking at that neighborhood data, tracking what percentage of your market is booked. Right now I'm in the low season and we are seeing occupancy spike up to 70%, which is super exciting here. But if you see, hey, we're in the high season and we're 95% booked, that might be a good indicator to say, hey, my property got booked before. It's clearly, in demand here. There is high demand for the market. So if any cancellations come up, let's actually increase the price. And that was using our occupancy day prices, doing a percent premium on those dates there. Awesome. Perfect. And I know we're getting low on time here, so let's get through the rest of this. So getting more bookings further out. This is something I see a lot. We're currently in the low season. Lots of bookings are coming in last minute in many markets. So you might not even be receiving bookings more than, let's say, 7 or 10 days in advance. And our goal is, of course, to push that out as far as possible. So the first thing to check, is there demand for far out dates in your market? So 2 places you can do this, either in this future occupancies chart we were looking at earlier here. So this one right here. So in this example that we have, you can see that there is some occupancy in the market. The market's getting about 30% booked or so up until March. So if you're trying to target those further out dates, you can see, hey, maybe the furthest out we can target is March. And then after March, there's a steep dip and no one is really booking further out. We're hovering at about 5 to 10% occupancy here. And of course, last minute, there's an additional spike here where rates are definitely even higher, super last minute here. So first thing to check, is there demand for far out dates? Another place you can check that is in our market dashboards. Apologies, Zoom is getting in the way here. But you can check our length of stay versus booking window and seeing, hey, how far out are most people traveling here? Maybe if you're in an urban market like Chicago, for example, that might be extremely last minute here with a lot of people booking, 2 to 6 days in advance, but maybe there is still demand far out. So first thing to ask, is there demand for far out dates? If there isn't and everything is coming in the last week, don't worry about what we're talking about here. But if there is, definitely stay tuned. So the next thing to check is, does the difference between your rates and the market rate change last minute? So, apologies. So here, what we see down below, our occupancy, which is this red line here, so this is my portfolio's occupancy, is outpacing this specific market for these dates up until March. So we're essentially getting more bookings than our fair share of the market until these March dates. Now, what happens in March? Demand dies down a little bit, but that is besides the point. B, before March, all of my rates are generally on the low end of the market price. So I'm generally below the median. I'm pricing on the lower end of the market, and concurrently my occupancy is outpacing the market here. Now, after March, you can see that my prices flip to being on the higher end of the market. So further out, I'm closer to that 75th percentile or way above that 75th percentile here. And that is when my bookings are completely drying out at the bottom here. So I would look at just looking at your prices here for individual listings, comparing your rates to that market's rates and seeing, hey, are my rates low currently last minute? And then do they get higher? And maybe that's what's keeping you from getting reservations here. So check how your rates compare to the market. And maybe last minute is the only time when you actually have a competitive rate set for your properties. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that our rates are set correctly for the market further out. And then we're adding appropriate last minute discounts last minute when demand decreases here. So what that means, we don't want a situation where we're only getting booked because our rate is low for the market last minute, and then we're not receiving any bookings because our rate increases without that last minute discount here. So if you have a scenario like that, where you just don't get bookings last minute, think about decreasing that base price to bring all of your prices down, and then maybe setting a less aggressive last minute discount since all of your prices are already lower. So there you could say, hey, I took my base price and instead of 145, since that was pricing me too high far out, I set it to 130. Then maybe in your customizations go in and then adjust your last minute discount to be, let's say, a 15% discount instead of our standard 30% discount that's applied by default here. So by really making sure you're optimized further out, you should start seeing more bookings come in. Same thing, occupancy-based adjustments. So we were going over these earlier. These can be super helpful just to stay on top of your pacing here. So the idea behind these is whenever your occupancy is lower than it should be, so let's say further out 2 to 3 weeks in advance, you do want to be around 50% occupancy in your market, these will automatically discount your prices until you're at that 50%. So until your pacing is where it should be, we'll be discounting your rates. Then once you get that amount of bookings, we'll of course kind of ease out with the discount. So if you're saying, hey, I'm not getting any bookings 16 to 30 days out, you could say, hey, instead of these discounts, let's maybe try, for example, our aggressive profile, which gets more aggressive on these pricing discounts to try to boost demand for these further out dates here. Alternatively, if you are using the default profile, you can leave these discounts last minute where they are and just say, hey, 16 to 30 days out, this is where I want to get more aggressive. So let's change these to 20% discounts and then 10% discounts to try to drive a little more demand here. All righty. And then, yep. And then if you ever see any anomalies where it looks like you're, way high for a certain date range, and that looks like that's keeping you from getting any bookings because demand is still relatively low in your market, you can always go in and say, hey, these dates, let's set an override since no one's booking them, and maybe, drop our price by 15% here. So just an idea, although I do think those more realistic prices, last minute discounts, and then occupancy-based adjustments are the main things to look at. Awesome. Next one, attracting longer stays. First thing to check, are longer stays getting booked in your market? So again, market dashboards, we have that dashboard that shows you, hey, when are most bookings coming in? First and foremost, we have that dashboard that says, are longer bookings coming in? So what is that length of stay? I think I had a dashboard that pictured this pretty well here, where in this market, a lot of 29 plus day stays are getting booked here. So now you would really want to say, hey, there are longer stays getting booked. There is demand for these longer stays. So how can I target those? Well, the first thing to check is, are weekly and monthly discounts common in the market, since those can definitely be used to try to get a little more demand for those longer stays without discounting any shorter stays that might be coming in. So with these, down at the bottom here of market dashboards, we have this policies and fees section, and this will display the weekly and the monthly discounts that are common for your area. So how this works, the blue line here is showing you the percentage of listings in your market that offer each of these kind of discount buckets. So what percent of listings offer an 11 to 15% discount versus what percent of listings offer a 36 to 40% discount. The orange line here will be showing you what percentage of 30 plus day stay bookings were made for each of these discount types. So you can see as we get into these higher discounts, the orange line outpaces the blue line. So that's basically saying, hey, there's more demand for these longer stays with higher discounts here. And then if you hover over any of these columns, we'll show you the base nightly price that most people paid at that discount. So one thing to look out for, sometimes you'll see, holy cow, 36 to 40% discounts are getting booked in my market. Let me get super aggressive with my discounting here. Definitely hover over these so that you can see what rate is actually getting discounted at these discount percentages. So what you'll sometimes notice is that small discounts might already be associated with a much lower base price, whereas these high discounts might be people who are setting very high prices for their properties and then just going super aggressive on their long-term discounting here. So 2 ways to think about it, definitely something to look out for, but look at what discounts are being offered and then see if you can offer something competitive. Definitely seen a lot of markets where people don't discount more than 11 to 15% or so. And there is, the opportunity to offer a 20% discount and just be the most aggressive in the market without, sacrificing too much of your revenue here. Now, the next thing to think about is what your maximum long-term discount should be. So the quick and dirty way of doing it is taking 100, subtracting your expected occupancy, and that is essentially the most you should discount for that longer month-long stay here. So if you expect to be 75% full this month, 100 minus 75%, that leaves you with 25% here. 25% monthly discount would essentially net you the same revenue as renting short term. So that's a very easy trade-off. You could say, hey, offer a 25% discount. I'm happy taking a monthly stay. Since my revenue will be the same, it's guaranteed revenue since someone's booking versus waiting for those bookings to come in. And then there's less headache on your end since there's, less cleaning, fewer gaps in between bookings, and all of those things. So you can discount more than that 25%, of course, if you put a premium on saying, hey, I no longer have the headache of managing this listing for the next month. I don't have to worry about sending over my cleaners. Don't have to worry about wear and tear. You could say, hey, I want to get as aggressive as 30 or 35%. That is totally okay too, but just a quick and dirty way of calculating that. Awesome. And then last one to cover before we hop into Q&A. I'm sorry I took up the full hour here, but we can stay a little bit longer maybe. Managing prices for weekends versus weekdays. So in a lot of markets, what I will see, I'll see lots of hosts who, when we look at their pricing calendar, we'll see something where, for instance, so I don't have this issue, but we'll see lots of hosts where Fridays and Saturdays are booked completely solid for the next 2 months, but their weekdays are sitting completely empty. So here we're essentially wanting to say, hey, your pacing for weekends and weekdays should ideally be the same if your pricing is healthy here. So if you are getting a ton of weekend bookings far out without filling any of your weekdays, A, your weekdays are likely too expensive, and B, you can be charging more for your weekends in that case since they're being booked so far in advance. So first and foremost, increase your weekend prices if all weekends are getting booked into the future. Easiest way to do that under customizations here. We have our day of week adjustments that let you say, hey, my Fridays and Saturdays are always booked. Let me bump those up by 15% here. My recommendation, bump it up by 15%. Let that sit for a week or two. See if reservations keep coming in at that higher price for Fridays and Saturdays. And then if they do keep coming in way far out in advance, say, hey, 25%, that was great. Let me bump it up by an additional 10%. Set it at 25% increase, see if those get booked and kind of keep iterating from there and find that sweet spot where your property is still getting booked, but not as far out in advance since, yeah, that means you're leaving a little bit of money on the table here. Next tip, either think about decreasing your weekday rates or offering a higher length of stay discount targeting, let's say, week-long stays so that your midweek dates get booked here. So you could say, hey, if Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are always empty, well, let's try to fill those dates. Let's offer a 15% discount here for those dates. And what that will do, it'll make the price for the entire week less expensive. So if someone is looking to book a week-long stay, of course, your weekends are already getting pretty good rates, but if someone's looking to book a week-long stay, now you are one of the more competitive properties and your weekdays would have gone empty anyway, so it's good to fill those regardless. Alternatively, you could say, hey, apply a 15% discount if someone books the entire week, 20% discount, 30% discount. You can get pretty aggressive with those discounts if those dates were to go unbooked anyways. You may as well fill those dates with someone who will pay a fee. And again, if you do take that weekly stay, less cleaning on your end. It's one fixed cost for taking the booking here. So, whatever you make for these dates, that's essentially a bonus for you here. Alrighty. Next one, setting longer minimum stays for weekends and decreasing them as you get closer to your booking date. So if you are getting booked solid on your weekends, at a minimum, you should have that 2-night minimum in for your weekends. What you can do though, experiment with a 3-night minimum. Try to get that additional night booked. So instead of just Friday, Saturday getting booked, you can get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So just by tacking on that one additional day, you're, increasing your revenue you're increasing your occupancy by 50% there, basically. So let's say if you're only getting Friday, Saturday booked, adding an additional day, hey, every week, instead of 2 days booked, now we have 3 days booked. So what you can do, set that 3-night minimum, but then say, hey, if no one books within the last 10 days, for example, or the last 15 days, take that minimum and drop it back down to 2 nights with this minimum stay for last minute bookings option. So here we're saying, hey, we tried to get full at that 3-night minimum for weekends. We didn't get a booking. So worst case, within those last 2 weeks here, let's drop it back down to that 2-night stay, get it filled up since demand is still high for those weekends, and we should have no issue filling those dates here. So setting that 3-night minimum, then dropping it back down to that 2-night minimum here. All righty. And then the last one would be looking at portfolio occupancy-based adjustments. So this is what we mentioned earlier when looking at your high season here. But again, if you go under your group customizations, we could turn on portfolio occupancy-based adjustments for you. And since these are looking at specific future dates and not your occupancy against this entire date range, if we ever see that all of your listings in your group are getting booked out for a particular weekend, or all of your weekends, we'll start automatically increasing your rates, when your group starts getting booked up for that weekend date here. So if you're saying, hey, 20 days to 60 days in advance, let's say 5 of my 10 listings are getting booked for a weekend, the remaining 5 listings would start seeing increases in their prices as that occupancy keeps increasing. So a good way to kind of maintain your pacing by increasing pricing automatically. Awesome. So those were the 10 tips we were hoping to cover. I know we do have a few questions in the Q&A that we'll switch over to. But again, the 3 things we covered, we mostly focused on dynamic pricing and market dashboards. We didn't hop into portfolio analytics quite yet. We kind of mostly glazed over those here. But if you aren't using PriceLabs yet, you can get your 30-day free trial of PriceLabs. Just head over to hello.pricelabs.co. There'll be a big start your 30-day trial. So if any of this sounds interesting, feel free to start that trial. Reach out if you have any questions here. Same thing goes for market dashboards. So after you start your trial, after you connect your listings, you will get 1 free credit to a market dashboard that will give you access for 30 days. So if you are just interested in that data, connect your listings to PriceLabs. You don't have to sync rates. But that will at least give you 1 free market dashboard to test out for your properties, if that sounds exciting here. And then portfolio analytics, those are free for the next 12 months here for all of our users. So any interest, definitely check those out. We do have some resources on our website to go over those here. But diving into questions. So I know a lot of questions came in here. Richie, anything particular that would be good to cover?
I think it might be good to cover one, how various discounts combine. Because there's a general question about day of week discounts will combine with occupancy-based pricing strategy.
Okay, yes, great question here. So with day of week discounts in particular, day of week adjustments should be thought of as an adjustment to our algorithm before any discounts start applying. So by default, PriceLabs is already adjusting your prices based off of the day of the week and the differences in demand that we see on certain dates here in your market. This would simply be increasing that adjustment or decreasing that adjustment that we're already applying to your listing. So this one will always apply with any other customizations. And then occupancy-based adjustments will, of course, apply on top of these day of week pricing adjustments. In general, other ones that are good to mention, last minute prices and orphan day prices. So if you have both of these set to discount, we will only use the higher discount of the two. So if you have, let's say, a 40% last minute discount, that's a flat discount within the last 10 days. And let's say you have a 20% discount for your orphan days. Any orphan days that are outside of 10 days will apply this 20% discount, but last minute, since the last minute discount is higher at 40%, will essentially ignore that 20% orphan day discount. These two won't stack up on top of each other. Last minute prices and orphan day prices, and occupancy based adjustments, these do stack up on top of each other. So if you have, let's say, a 15% discount due to low occupancy and a 20% last minute discount, those will stack up on top of each other here. A few examples, do let us know if you have any kind of other specific examples you want us to look into here.
Super cool. Okay, I was just typing this out, but there are so many options. Do you recommend using default, or how do you recommend people progressing through some of these customizations?
Definitely. So by default, the default settings work great for most of our users in most markets. So I'll go into a lot of portfolios that have all of these things turned off, and their pricing is functioning very, very, very well. So I typically only recommend using these customizations if you're making an adjustment based off of the bookings that you see coming in. So if you see, for example, that, hey, all of these things that we're talking about today are places where you would use customizations to more add onto your pricing strategy. So I guess we went over 10 tips. Most of those would be executed through the customizations. So you can see those are typically more strategy-based things that you want to be applying if you want your rates to do a certain thing, a certain amount of time in advance, or react to occupancies or any of those things. In general, the one thing I recommend that everyone use are our minimum stay settings, and using those dynamic minimum stays to, promote shorter bookings last minute to fill all of your gaps, using our gap fillers to fill all of your gaps, but then also requiring those longer stays far out so that you are protecting your calendar. So at a minimum, I would recommend minimum stay updates. Otherwise, for the most part, you can use our default and then just adjust as necessary to react to booking trends if you aren't receiving bookings or if you are here.
Fantastic. And my answer to that, if I could add, is I recommend users to set at a minimum 3 things. 1, set your base price, set your minimum price, and set the minimum stays. If you have those 3 set up, PriceLabs' algorithm will take care of a bunch of things that Oliver went through here. And if you, like he said, if you want to optimize further, that's when you can drill into customizations and optimize further. But at a minimum, if you go look into your account, set your minimum price, set your base price, and then set your minimum stays. Those are the 3 things that would get you 90% there.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Berta is asking, where do I find weekly, monthly discounts, as well as cleaning fees and cancellation fees?
Yes, so those were up in the market dashboard. So if you haven't created a market dashboard yet, top right corner here in PriceLabs. And then if we hop into one of those market dashboards, it'll be the last section here called policies and fees. So that's where we go into all those discounts, all those cleaning fees, cancellation policies, all that good stuff here.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm not fully sure I understand, but Angela is asking, I only have base price filled out for my listing. When I go to neighborhood data, there are certain dates that say my current price is. I'm going to follow up one-on-one on this call on this question. How do you make sure when you pull historical data to predict future prices that you don't pull 2020 data, which is obviously bad?
Which is obviously bad. Yes. So a lot of our pricing, so all of our weekly, day of week adjustments, all of our future date premiums. So where we're looking at, the future market occupancy and increasing your pricing wherever we see higher neighborhood occupancy, all of that is based off of future dates. And then most of our seasonality is based off of historic data typically from before 2020. So we'll use historic seasonalities, and then we've been making adjustments to our seasonalities as we go to account for these new booking trends. So we're definitely not pulling purely 2020 data when coming up with your rates. And a lot of the data that we're pulling is forward-looking data for future rates, to making sure that we're optimized for what is happening in your market in the future, instead of past dates to set your pricing based off of those. And really quick, Richie, I did want to jump back to that question that was asking about looking at the neighborhood data and looking at the current price versus recommended price. A quick clarification on this. So in our market data, you'll see a dotted line that says your current price, and then the black line will be recommended price. So recommended price is what you see in this calendar here. So all of these rates in this calendar are this black line that says recommended price. Current price, that's what's currently in your PMS or in Airbnb. So the next time you click sync and sync your rates from PriceLabs to your listing, your current price will be replaced by your recommended price, since now the price in your PMS is the same as what's in your calendar and PriceLabs here. So if you want those to match up, just click sync now and we'll send those new rates right over here.
Got it. And my apologies, Angela. I had a little bit of a brain fart there, but I did not understand the question. Really sorry. Cool. Nicole's asking, your Verbo price setting options fully functional? I've tried the feature and like it very much. Nicole, I'm not fully sure what Verbo price settings you're talking about. We do have a Verbo extension where you can send rates to Verbo. We're working on an integration, but we don't have a direct integration with Verbo right now. There is a Chrome extension that you can use with PriceLabs to send prices to Verbo.
Yep.
Cool.
So with that extension, if you go into that bottom question mark in the bottom right corner, type in Verbo here, we'll pull up that article. So if you do want to send rates to Verbo, this is the current solution using our Chrome extension here, and instructions on how to use it.
Okay, and that's really it. Still have a lot of people on the call. I'm assuming, hoping that this was helpful. Guys, if you have any questions, we're going to be here for another minute or two. Feel free to ask now. Or if you think of any questions, email us at support@pricelabs.co, and we'll quickly get back to you from there.
Awesome. And then if you look into any of our portfolio analytics or any of our kind of market dashboards we were covering today, definitely let us know if there's any trends that would be helpful to see in the future. Constantly making improvements, so always want to hear from you guys.
Cool. With that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Oliver, wrap it up.
All righty, perfect. I know we did go a little longer here, 15 minutes longer. Everyone, thanks so much for staying this long. I know most of you stayed. I will be sending the recording out here in about 2 or so hours here after everything's processed. So look for that in your inboxes. Otherwise, if there are any other questions, send those over, support@pricelabs.co. Always happy to help. And if you have any ideas for what you'd want to see on future webinars, send those over as well. All righty, have a great rest of your week. And yeah, take care, everyone. See you later.
Take care. Bye now.